The announcement of a $3 trillion megacity project in Burkina Faso under the leadership of Ibrahim Traoré has captured global attention not simply because of its staggering financial scope, but because of what it represents in the broader struggle for African self-determination, modernization, and independence. For decades, the very notion of such a transformative project would have seemed almost impossible for a landlocked West African nation that had often been dismissed by the global elite as a peripheral player in world affairs. Yet today, Burkina Faso is attempting to rewrite its destiny, positioning itself at the center of a new conversation about African innovation, economic restructuring, and the rise of visionary projects that challenge the old assumptions of underdevelopment. The concept of a megacity in Africa is not entirely new. Countries like Nigeria, Egypt, and Kenya have all floated ambitious plans for futuristic urban hubs designed to attract foreign investment, technology, and talent. However, what makes Burkina Faso's $3 trillion initiative stand out is both the scale and the timing. At a moment when the global economy is in flux, when questions over the future of the U.S. dollar dominate international debates, and when Africa is increasingly seen as the final frontier for resource-driven growth and industrial transformation, Ibrahim Traoré has chosen to position his country not as a follower, but as a leader in reshaping what Africa can become. For Burkina Faso, a country whose economy has historically been tied to subsistence agriculture, cotton, and gold exports, the idea of constructing a $3 trillion megacity may seem at first glance like an unattainable dream. Critics will naturally question where the financing will come from, how governance structures will ensure transparency, and whether such a project is even feasible given the realities on the ground. Yet, to dismiss this plan outright is to misunderstand the changing dynamics not only of Burkina Faso, but of Africa as a whole. Across the continent, younger leaders, many of them military figures who have risen to prominence by rejecting the dictates of neocolonial structures, are emphasizing the need for bold action that breaks with incrementalist models of development. Traoré is a symbol of this new wave, unafraid to challenge institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, and Western governments that have long dictated Africa's economic trajectory. The $3 trillion megacity plan is not just an infrastructure project. It is a declaration of intent. It signals Burkina Faso's determination to leapfrog traditional stages of development by investing in futuristic architecture, green technologies, and industrial hubs that can integrate the country into global supply chains on its own terms. At its core, the vision is about more than concrete and steel. It is about sovereignty, dignity, and rewriting the story of Africa's role in the 21st century. When examining such a project, it is essential to understand both the symbolic and practical dimensions. Symbolically, the announcement positions Burkina Faso as an ambitious player willing to dream beyond the limitations imposed by outsiders. Practically, it opens doors to new partnerships, particularly with non-Western actors such as China, Russia, the Gulf states, and emerging economies across Asia and Latin America. The strategic context cannot be ignored. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar have increasingly invested in African real estate, agriculture, and infrastructure as part of their food security and diversification strategies. China's Belt and Road Initiative has already laid the foundation for Africa to connect more deeply to Asian markets. Russia, too, has made clear its interest in building stronger economic and military partnerships with African nations, seeking alternatives to Western dependency. Burkina Faso's mega-city project, with its massive financial scale, will inevitably attract attention from all these players, creating both opportunities and risks as the country navigates competing interests. For the Burkinabe people and the UMOS, mega-city is being framed not simply as a place of skyscrapers and highways, but as a hub of modern education, healthcare, research, and technology. In official statements, the idea has been tied to goals of creating millions of jobs, reversing brain drain, and fostering a new middle class that can sustain domestic demand. If realized even partially, such a development could transform Burkina Faso from one of the world's least developed nations into a model of African-led modernization. However, the challenges are monumental. Infrastructure requires not only money but skilled labor, logistical capacity, and long-term stability. Land acquisition, urban planning, and environmental sustainability are all pressing issues that will determine whether the megacity becomes a futuristic marvel or a stranded asset. It is worth noting that mega-projects across the world have a mixed history. In Dubai, the transformation of a desert into a global hub of trade, tourism, and finance has often been cited as a case study in how vision, capital, and political will can achieve the seemingly impossible. Yet, in other parts of the world, including some African states, grand urban projects have stalled due to corruption, lack of funding, or shifting political priorities. For Burkina Faso, the stakes are particularly high because the scale of the project leaves little room for failure. If executed successfully, it would cement Ibrahim Traoré's legacy as the leader who propelled his nation into a new era. If it falters, it risks being remembered as a symbol of overreach. Still, the sheer announcement of the project has already had geopolitical ripple effects. Western observers, long accustomed to seeing Burkina Faso through the narrow lens of poverty and instability, have been forced to reckon with a narrative shift. Media outlets in Europe and the United States have expressed skepticism, but also unease at the idea of African nations pursuing development strategies independent of Western financial institutions. By framing the megacity as a $3 trillion project, Traoré is not only capturing the imagination of his people, but also sending a message to the world that Burkina Faso intends to play at the highest level of global ambition. At the heart of this story is a broader question. What does it mean for Africa to rise? For too long, the continent has been spoken about as a place of potential rather than reality, of future promise rather than present achievement. The megacity project disrupts that narrative by demanding that Africa be seen not as a follower, but as a leader in global innovation. It dares to place Burkina Faso in the same category of ambition as countries like China, the United Arab Emirates, and even the United States, whose own mega-projects historically reshaped the world order. Of course, one cannot discuss a project of this magnitude without addressing the financial aspect. $3 trillion is not just an extraordinary sum. It is equivalent to more than the GDP of most African countries combined. Even global giants like Japan or Germany would balk at such a figure for a single project. Therefore, it is likely that the financing model will not rely on traditional loans or aid, but on a combination of foreign direct investment, public-private partnerships, and innovative financing mechanisms such as resource-backed agreements. With Burkina Faso's wealth in gold and other natural resources, resource for infrastructure deals are almost certainly on the table, particularly with China and other Asian partners. Sovereign wealth funds from the Middle East may also see in this project an opportunity to diversify their portfolios while deepening ties with a country that is becoming increasingly central to Africa's political realignment. But the financial element also underscores the political message. Burkina Faso is rejecting the IMF-style conditional loans that have trapped African nations in cycles of dependency. Instead, it is signaling that new models of development, rooted in multipolar partnerships and self-reliance, are the way forward. For the Burkinabe people, this represents a shift not just in policy, but in identity. It is about seeing themselves, not as passive recipients of aid, but as active shapers of global progress. If this project moves forward, the next decade could see Burkina Faso become a laboratory for futuristic urban design in Africa. Smart cities powered by renewable energy, interconnected by AI-driven infrastructure, and designed to balance tradition with modernity could redefine what African urban life looks like. Cultural identity would remain central, ensuring that the megacity is not simply a replica of Western models, but a distinctly African creation that honors the heritage of its people while embracing technological advancement. The global implications are profound. Western powers, already concerned about the decline of their influence in Africa, will view this project through the lens of geopolitical competition. For the United States, France, and the European Union, the possibility of Burkina Faso aligning more closely with non-Western partners for such a massive undertaking is deeply unsettling. For emerging powers like China, India, Russia, and the Gulf states, however, it represents an opportunity to expand influence and secure new partnerships in Africa. Thus, what began as an announcement about a city could become a catalyst for a broader reshaping of alliances, with Burkina Faso at the center of the storm. Ultimately, the $3 trillion mega-city project in Burkina Faso is about much more than infrastructure. It is about vision, leadership, and the refusal to accept the status quo. It is about a generation of Africans who are demanding more than survival. They are demanding prosperity, dignity, and a seat at the global table. Whether the project is completed in its entirety or not, its very conception has already achieved something extraordinary. It has redefined the way the world sees Burkina Faso and how Burkina Faso sees itself. The shock it has delivered to the world lies not only in the numbers, but in the audacity of the dream. At a time when global power structures are being questioned, when multipolarity is reshaping geopolitics, and when Africa is asserting itself as a continent of destiny rather than despair, Ibrahim Traoré's announcement stands as a bold declaration that the future will not be written without Africa. It will be written with Africa at the center, with Burkina Faso playing a role far greater than anyone had previously imagined. And so, as the world debates the feasibility of a $3 trillion megacity, the deeper truth is that this vision has already transformed the narrative. The shockwaves are not just economic but psychological, reminding both Africa and the rest of the world that ambition knows no borders, and that even in the heart of West Africa, dreams of global consequence can be born.